What's up, guys? Back at me here at Beyblade Burst Surge, episode 4. Listen to Bay's voice. Okay, so the episode starts off with with battles getting into the rank, trying to get into the rank A. Rentaro lightning launches, Renjiro lightning launches, Volt lightning launches, Silas lightning launches, Hikaru lightning launches, but Hyuga does not lightning launch. And yeah, and Volt wrecks Hikaru, Silas wrecks Hyuga, and then just up and Renjiro wrecks Rentaro, and yeah, and yeah, and then after the intro, we see Hyuga training, and he can't get it, so he goes outside where he needs Wolf, and Wolf's like, hey, every time I used to be a newbie, and when I needed to copy off someone, I copied off Shu. And he's like, yeah, and he's like, and then he goes like, yeah, and he's like, who's Shu? And Wolf's like, bruh, you don't know. Actually, Volt just does a thing, but it's like, bruh, Iger knew who Shu was. It could have been because of, like, Fubuki telling him who Shu was, but Iger knew who Shu was. And Hyuga doesn't. So Volt has to, like, explain to him who Shu is, and he's like, I want to battle him. And he's like, there's one thing you have to do. Listen to your Bay's voice. And he's like, listen to my Bay's voice. And even Hikaru's over here listening to it, so hearing this. And then Hyuga's like walking around trying to be like, come on, Hyperion. And then Silas is like, hey, let's train. And he's like, and then because he's listening to his voice, doesn't hear Silas, and Silas is like, huh, he ignored me. And yeah, so then we see Hyuga walking through sand, walking through the beach, and Reina, who I learned her name is Reina, not right, guys, that's Japanese name. Reina, Guy, and Chuck. I'm gonna call her Reina from now on. Reina, Guy, and Chuck are just like there, and they're like yeah. So he just like, hey, and they're like, who's he talking to? And then he could just runs through sand, just face palms in the sand. And then he's like, how did I get all the way to the common gym? And then we get to a flashback of when he and Hikaru first joined the Comets. And then we get back to the and then Hyuga thinks he's hearing Hyperion's voice, but it's just Reina. And they're like, and they're like, hey, we want to search through whatever you just said with you, Hyuga. And they get into a battle where he beats all three of them. And then he hears Hyperion's voice, and then Hyperion glows, and then across town, or wherever this is, we see Hikaru, and Hikaru Helios glows, and he just runs, and they're like, we're coming with you too, Hyuga. And then Hyuga's like, Hikaru, Hyperion wants to battle Helios. So we get to the training area, and then we see Volt, Silas, and Rain, and they're like, and Volt's like, he really saw Hyperion's, he really heard Hyperion's voice. And he's like, yeah, right. And he's like, yeah. So we get into the battle between Hikaru and Hyuga, and they're like, 3, 2, 1, let it rip. Hyuga does the lightning launch, Hikaru does the lightning launch, and we get into the battle. And we see Hyperion's avatar, we see Helios' avatar, Hyuga goes Super Strike, Hikaru goes Colossal Strike, and they burst. But they're like, let's do that again. So then that ends the first. Then that ends the first part of the episode. So then we get into the second part, which was called Meet the Monster for Yellow Hoya in Japan. So, but I think this will be kept the same, or will be changed to, yeah, I think it'll be kept the same. But yeah, but as I always say, this second part hasn't been reviewed at the time of me uploading this video. So yeah, so let's get into the second part. Okay, so the second part starts off with Hikaru and Hyuga training, with them both using Super Strike and Colossal Strike, and then Rintaro's like, "Hey Reina, how's the score?" So then as they're battling, Volt's like, "Hey," and then he's like, "Hey, you guys are going to Spain." And he's like, Spain. He's like, "Where's Spain?" He's like, Spain's in Spain." And Charles like, "Oh, Spain's in Spain." And yeah, and then Reina's like, "Hey, Spain has like a bunch of stuff." And then Carl's like, "It even has beastly soul." And yeah, so yeah, so he's like, and then Walt's like, "There's someone that I want you to meet." And he's like, "Yeah, this guy's a real monster." And he's like, "A monster? Where?" Sorry, just kidding. That was kind of that reference. They never actually did that, but they're like, "A monster?" Yeah, and then he's like, "Free De La Hoya. Free De La Hoya is a real monster." Yeah. So yeah, so Hyuga has a weird nightmare of a weird food monster attacking him, but it's actually just Rintaro's cape on him. And yeah, so then they get to El Astros, or yeah, I'm gonna call it El. They get to El Astros. Sorry, don't know my mouth could. El Astros. I kept saying Al Astros there. So anyway, they get to Al Astros, and then like, "Let's battle free." So they go, and then they run into a baby deer, and they're like, and Hikaru's like, "Hyuga, like that deer's gonna tell you where it's going." And then Hikaru's like, and then Hyuga's like, "Hey, the deer knows where free is." And he's like, "Oh, come on." So the deer tells them where free is, and we see free in this golden light, and somehow they just know this is free. It's like, "That's free," and they're like, somehow they know this. We never saw them with an iPad or a thing to show them that they know it's free. They just think that's free, and they're like, "Hey, free, battle us!" And free is in two of his concentration mode and lets it rip. And he's like, "Where did my students get off to now?" And then free's like, and then yeah. So then free's like, "Hey, Rintaro, hey Vol." And yeah, Free kind of sounds the same. Some people say Free sounds different, but to me, he still sounds like he's still voiced by Koyao, who voiced him in Beyblade Burst Turbo. Maybe that's why he sounds a little different than Koyao's first time as Free. But yeah, so Free's like, "Hey, Volt's like, "Hey, you finished it." And he's like, "Yeah, Mirage Fafnir." And yeah, so he's like, "Hey." And he's like, hey, Rintaro, let's have a battle." So now we got Glide Rock Dwarf versus Mirage Fafnir, and then Rintaro does a lightning launch, but there was no sparks from Free's launcher, so he does a soft launch, and Fafnir does the boom boom. He does. Sorry, that's my own. Sorry for that. And then he's like, your stamina won't be God. Your Mirage Fafnir won't be Glide Rock for stamina. And he's like, "Mirage, claw," and knocked him out of the stadium. And then he's like, "Sut Volt, you're up next." And they're like, "Free." He's like, he's like, yeah, he's like, who were you guys? And he's like, you weren't even paying attention to us. And he's like, hey, these are Rentaro students. They're very interesting. And they're like, he's like, yeah, then let's have a battle. And he's like, I'll take 2 of you on. And he's like, yeah. And he's like, what do you guys think? And he's like, yeah. Well, so it's Hyperion and Hyuga versus Mirage Fafnir, and they do a sparking launch. Free does a soft launch, and they're like, let's do the twin strike move again. So they're like, twin strike, but Free's like, no, Mirage Claw. And she goes, Fafnir. And we see Fafnir's avatar. Then they try to go twin strike. He goes, Mirage Claw. And burst them. And then he also sees Free also someone, a rookie player in New York, beat Free, and now Free created Mirage Fafnir to beat that rookie player. He even saw that rookie player in the auras of Hyuga and Hikaru. So yeah, so this episode is pretty good. It introduced Free again, for those who haven't seen Beyblade Burst Turbo, because we all know who's in Beyblade Burst Rise. Fumiya, Kendo, worst character. And yeah, so Free and his so Fumiya destroyed the Fafnir name, but Free has now reclaimed it with Mirage Fafnir. He's now trying to rebuild the Fafnir name that Fumiya destroyed. That's what people say. But anyway, like, comment, subscribe. Have a wonderful afternoon, and I'll see you next Beyblade Burst Surge.